Hello, everyone. Welcome to this second lecture of this political science series. As discussed in the first lecture, our video time limit is around 15 minutes. So, we're going to keep the pleasantries to a minimum and we're going to jump straight into the lecture right now so as to cover maximum things. In this lecture, we'll be discussing about basic concepts of the optional. These concepts are useful primarily on account of three things. Firstly, that these terms would be coming again and again in the entire optional, so it's better to get a grip and a handle on what exactly these concepts mean. And secondly, these would be since these are basic building blocks of the optional, this would help you grasp other more complex concepts much more easily. And thirdly, these would be very useful in a interview preparation. It's these basic terms are very common for the interview panel to ask. Kiji, your subject is political science, so what is politics? Yeah, what is science? Why is it called political science? Such questions like this, interview panel likes to play around with such basic concepts to test whether आपने ढंग से you studied the subject and taken a curiosity in the subject, or have you just mocked it up? So that's why these concepts are important. We'll jump straight into it. So first of all, whenever we see the subject political science, the first term that comes into our mind is politics. What exactly is politics? uh, First, let me just clarify one thing. In political science, there is no standard definition for any of the concepts. So, majority of the things that we talk about would be more of interpretation aspects. Gee, I believe, or I think, or majority of the thinkers think that politics is this, or a large section of population thinks the definition or the meaning of this particular concept is this, and we try to analyze it from different angles. ठीक है ना? Just keep that in mind whenever we are studying the subject. When we talk about politics, ये वाला term we hear it on a very day-to-day basis in different type of social and economic standing. We hear it in our day-to-day lives. You might hear the term politics in your office, in your college, even in college, schools, educational institutions. You hear the term politics in sports, everywhere. Some politicians have also claimed that politics is even there in their pants. So the concept of politics is such a vague as well as such a wide concept. So, मतलब, if you want to shorten it or try to put a pin in it, what exactly is politics? So, mota moti, it relates to something to do with governance, and it involves decision making. Now, when we say decision making and governance, it doesn't necessarily means that we're talking about institutions of the state like the district administration or to do with political parties, etc. It involves governance and decision making. Now, the setting can be anything. Like we said, uh, sports may we see ki there is a lot of politics in sports. Let's take the example of Indian cricket team. So when we talk about Indian cricket team, now how the decisions are being taken and how the team is being governed itself, that the entire concept and the flow is politics. So normally politics is used in a negative connotation, that people are doing politics. That means that they're playing dirty and they're illicit elements are trying to get their way, and incompetent people are getting good return on their work or lack of it, and the meritorious people are being left behind. Normally politics is linked with that, but actually the crux of politics is effectively how the governance it is running. due to the time and our era, we've come to relate politics in a very negative manner. And however, if you look at it in a ancient and when we'll also get into that, we look at it on a longer time perspective. So politics, the meaning of politics has changed all across time. The negative or the positive connotation, I mean, the real meaning has remained the same all across, but the connotations have changed. So, when we talk about politics in for our subject, that is at a societal level. When we talk about political parties, we talk about the governments, we talk about the state, we talk about people, citizens, etc., etc. So, is key governance, like say governance of the country, uh, who all are the stakeholders in it? If you look at it at a very minimalistic level, we need not put every citizen's name in as a stakeholder. As if we categorize all the stakeholders, there are mainly three stakeholders involved. That is the individual, the society, and the state. Now, these are three governance of the power structures which decide or interplay amongst each other to arrive at decision which are useful for the individual, society, and the state. They it is not, you have to understand one thing, that it is not a competition between these three elements. It is always a complementary and a mutually respectful relationship that needs to exist, because at the end of the day, if individual is not functioning properly, then the society will not function properly, and in effect the state will not function properly. Or if the state starts misbehaving, uh, it will crumble onto itself, and that will negatively impact both society and the individual. So these all are interlinked and effectively can be said to be same thing at the end of the day, because all these three governance structure or the power structures are made of the same basic building blocks, that is the individual, but their roles are different. That's why we're categorizing them as three power structures or three governance structures. Now, the concept of politics would be the interaction between these three elements in order to ensure a peaceful, harmonious life in which everybody is able to excel as per their own choices, as per they're able, there is equality amongst the people, there is equal opportunity, there is lack of violence, there are plenty of developmental opportunities, etc., etc. And concept of politics would also come in handy, or it is related to the interpretation of state. Now, when say state over here, it doesn't mean the governmental structure, it means authority. Now, if you broaden your horizons a bit, you authority as a concept doesn't necessarily rest in the, say, bureaucratic or the political structures. It may rest in economic structure. So, or the decision making may rest in the social structures, in the tribal structures. Uh, it may rest with, say, individuals, some unique or some powerful individuals that would, that can decide the fate of the entire society slash state or country, etc. So I'll be explaining all these concepts in much more detail. Abhi, though it's just a bird's eye view of what we are talking about. Yeah. So now let's politics as a wide or broader aspect हमने समझ लिया. We'll be talking about how political aspects, कोई भी political concept होगा, जैसे equality, liberty, fraternity, talking about constitutional changes, etc., etc. तो जब भी हम political कोई aspects, whenever we will want to understand it, there are three ways in explaining any political concept. That is theory, philosophy, and science. I'll give you an example of it later. And how do we know what exactly is the political concept? We know it through the political thought. Because understand one thing: whenever we are studying this political thought, we'll be studying it on a uh, wider level. It would not. We will never study political thoughts or any social studies topics for that matter इन एन इंडिविजुअल टू इंडिविजुअल लेवल की जी मैंने ये कहा और तुमने ये सुना और तुमने ये सोचा, ये वाली बातें कभी नहीं होगी. इट विल ऑलवेज बी कि जी नॉर्थ इंडिया में दिस इज द थिंकिंग, और in northeastern India, this is how political structures are governed. This is how society interacts. This is a very small but a peculiar example that when like I stayed in Bangalore for a while, you'll see over there the there are a lot of bus conductors which are of female gender. Vis-a-vis in North India, you do not see that. So this behavior, social behavior towards a particular gender in different roles, forms a part of political thought. Like, what is the role of a particular gender in the entire socio-political process? So it's a very small example, but if you elaborate it on a wider, spatial and a temporal level, so these hold significance. So whenever we talk about political thought, okay, political thought is nothing more than it's just the summation of all the political concepts and the political concepts of that particular age and time. That's why we're saying that it has spatial and temporal dimension. That is, how do people of a certain time period in a particular area think about these political concepts? I'll give you a very brief example. Like, how do people in ancient India used to think about the concept of kingship in India? Ancient India हो गया आपका geographical dimension. एंशंट हो गया आपका टेम्पोरल डायमेंशन, इंडिया हो गया आपका जोग्राफिकल डायमेंशन, पॉलिटिकल कंसेप्ट हो गया से किंगशिप, किंगडम या empires, etc., etc. So how did the entire section of Indian people used to think about that in that particular time frame? अब how do we get to know कि जी इतने सारे लोग क्या सोचते थे, या तब क्या सोचते थे, अब how मतलब there can be a million, there would have been a million voices. So how do I know who used to think what? This is where the political thinkers come in place. Now, one thing you need to appreciate that there are not a lot of unique thoughts floating around even in the millions of voices. When you start to reduce all these to basic core building block or core structures of the thought, so these will effectively turn out to be four or five different thoughts, which are like of the million people thinking different so-called things. If you break down into core building blocks, you'll find that at the end there are two, three, maximum four, five unique thoughts that exist. So that's where the political thinkers come in place. These are representative of a particular place and age. जैसे कि we say that if I want to study ancient India, I'll look at thinkers like Kautilya, also known as Chanakya, or Manu. We'll talk about when we want to talk about, say, modern India, we'll probably refer to Mr. B.R. Ambedkar or Mahatma Gandhi, or we'll refer to M.N. Roy, for different ideological streams that they sort of represent. So इसलिए of a particular place and age, these thinkers and their thoughts represent the political thought of that particular time. तभी you'll see that in common parlance you might have read in the newspapers also that people talking about that this is modern thought, this is medieval thought. Yeah, in day-to-day life you must have heard some people saying ki this particular man or woman has very modern thinking, he has very medieval thinking. Yeah, feudal mindset. So what exactly do they mean by that? They effectively means that all these terms, modern thinking or feudal mindset, these all have certain characteristics, I'm not saying whether it's good or bad, but these are certain characteristics that that particular person or that particular thinker is representing. For example, if in medieval era, people or that political thinker used to think of, say, women as property of men. Okay. Now, in current time, if I have a thinking that females are supposed to be property of men, so I can be easily categorized as having a medieval thought, because my thinking and my thoughts are aligned with the thinkers of medieval time frame. Okay? So you're trying to categorize the thoughts at a spatial and a temporal level, not the people itself. So technically, I am in postmodern era, current in 2021, but I am thinking of those times, or thinking at the same frequency or the level of people in, say, 1600s. So does my thoughts make the medieval thought as postmodern, or does the postmodern thought becomes medieval? No, it is simply that my thinking is similar to the thinking of people at large in 1600s. And how do I know the people of thinking at large in 1600s was? Is through the political thinkers. Okay. It might be a little confusing, and you need not matlab, remember this by heart, but you'll easily grasp it as we go along. So don't worry about that. Now, how would these political thoughts be explained? जैसे कि I said कि जी, we'll still take the controversial medieval thought that females are property of males. Hmm. How does anybody explain that? Political thinkers will give a political theory. They will try to explain and justify what their idea is. Okay. So, and political theory कैसी होगी? This is political theory will be based on these three aspects. It will be a philosophy, science, or it's supposed to be, this is, or a religion. So, what is the basic differentiation between them? Agar if the concept is being explained by simple logic, then it's philosophy. And if it is given the justification or the verification is based on verifiable and empirical evidence, data, numbers, then it comes in the category of science. And if it is just primarily based on faith, कि जी, no if, no but, सिर्फ, so that is based in the category of religion. A very simple example we can take in this is, say, Panchayati Raj institutions. Now, after 73rd and 74th Amendment, if the I say कि Panchayati Raj institutions say there will be women empowerment, Dalit empowerment. Now, I just give logic behind that. That after we introduce this 73rd and 74th Amendment, there'll be reservations, there'll be more voice, there'll be interest of the disempowered sections will be brought forward, there'll be equality, parity, etc. etc. Now, I'm just giving logic and reasoning. So, that will come under the category of philosophy. On the other hand, if I come up with, say, empirical evidence, we do Panchayati Raj institutions on a sample basis, on pilot project, on, say, in a few districts, and then we collect evidences that what was the, say, poverty rate in Dalits pre Panchayati Raj, post Panchayati Raj, what are the socio-economic indicators pre Panchayati Raj, post Panchayati Raj, what are the indicators in women empowerment pre Panchayati and post Panchayati, and how are things different, and what are the factors that contribute, and what are the factors that are directly related to Panchayati Raj. So, this, if I try to explain my theory or my angle through such empirical and verifiable evidence, then that's called science. And thirdly, if I just say ki, nahi ji, just do it because the God, or because it's written in the scriptures that people should be able to govern themselves, people should directly govern themselves, and there's no reason for it, but it has to be done. I'm not saying that faith is a bad thing. I'm just telling you how it get categorized into a religion category. Somebody in say, because for example, Tamil Nadu has still has a deep and ancient tradition of holding these local assemblies or these local what do you say governing institutions. So they might just harp back to it that since there was a Nadu element, that Nadu was the governing structure that was called Nadu in say 1100. So and it's written in our scriptures. So we'll do it. Why? What? No, nothing. No questioning to it. We'll just do it. So this will come into the category of religion. So these are three ways in which political thinkers will try to explain their political thoughts. Okay? And it's not that all the political thinkers will be using only one way because they have to justify and explain what their thought is. So they'll use a mix of all three approaches. It'll be a use of philosophy, a use of science, and if need be, they will try to impress on your faith and your subjective faculties rather than the logical ones. And ये वाली चीज तो I guess you would have understood by now that the concepts that they try to introduce and so any new thought would relate to a new addition that they want in the political structures or a modification in the politics itself. For example, if during the end of medieval era, some political thinkers would be like church and state should be separate, and state should have control, dominion over all the secular life of the people. Okay, so they are trying to modify and change the current political structure by giving different political thought using political theory, hmm, and trying to give different concepts that instead of having a king and a pope, let's just have a sovereign elected government, uh, or a democracy, or say secular modern state defined by geographical boundaries, etc. So, matlab, we'll study all about these in detail. I'm just telling you how political thoughts influence the real life structures. And since in every thought, it'll either be an introduction into the politics or it'll be modification. Okay? That's how we'll define what the different aspects or different thoughts are. If you want to categorize the different thoughts, since we'll be studying the Western political thought from firstly, so Western political thought can be categorized into four main aspects. Okay, I'll cover this very fast as the time is almost up. So, firstly, Western political thought. I'll also, if anybody wants, I'll give this Word document also to people. You can pause the video and take a screenshot of it. So when you talk about Western political thought, there are four main categories. There's ancient thought, there's medieval thought, there's modern thought, and postmodern thought. Currently we're living in the postmodern thought era. FYI. तो जब हम when we talk about ancient Western political thought, it has primarily Greek philosophers who are responsible or who gave the first political thinking in the Western sphere of the world. We You must have heard about the city states of Athens, Sparta, etc. So this is where the birthplace of Western democracy is, and in those city states, this was a grassroots democracy. जैसे कि almost similar to the Panchayati Raj institutions that we have currently, and there was no a difference between a state and a society. It was more like a self-governance structure, and the terms of politics and social terms they were used interchangeably. Because effectively, say population, it's what say 10,000 people maximum, and everybody knows everybody, and they are making their own laws for themselves for the entire population, and they are abiding by it because it is made by themselves only, and they're the ones enforcing it also. So uh, the terms of politics and social society are effectively same. And this was the time when politics was considered a noble profession. This was considered a good aspect, as politics, as agar aap, if you remember, politics is to do with governance structure, and governance structure's main aim is to give you a harmonious and a peaceful life, which helps you excel in whatever sphere you want. So effectively, politics becomes a good thing to provide the society and the individual a noble path to excellence or a good life. ठीक है ना? तो इसलिए these were ethical societies. Ethics, morality, and politics were considered same. Like the word were used interchangeably. And when you look at it as societal perspective, again, society and politics, society state, it's the same thing. Considered the same thing in ancient Greece. ठीक है? So politics is defined as achieving good life. ठीक है? Purpose of state is to provide good life. So you see how point HI ties to point D. How these are ethical society. मतलब, the thing I was talking about, that not always politics will be considered a bad thing. In ancient Greece, it was not. It was considered to be a noble profession, and there was idealistic thinking. Okay. There are two more points: that system of slavery was instituted in ancient Greece, and it was sort of justified back then. Uh, Technically, it was justified till around what, a couple of 100 years ago, also till 100 of years ago. And as per some reports, we still have modern slavery. More on that later. अभी हम ये खत्म कर लेते हैं फटाफट. When we talk about Western medieval thought, the location of that is Roman Empire. This is effectively the growth of Greek civilization, and then it got crystallized into the Roman Empire, and then we all know how it descended, and the Western nations were born. So during this time, it was primarily based on faith. We see influence of religion very strongly during the medieval thought, and there were no defined states per se. It was an empire, the borders of which kept on changing on a day-to-day basis. So you have church and there was no concept of sovereignty, and there were feudal lords and local princesses who were trying to find more space for their own kingdoms. ठीक है ना? Because nobody, if you look at it from a third party perspective, there's no claim to who will rule the people. It's just one king fighting the other king, and the normal people agreeing to their fate. कि ठीक है जी, आप लोग लड़ लो, whoever wins will agree to pay tax to them. It doesn't matter how our lives will still be the same. I'm just say a poor farmer. My life will still be the same. You want to fight to death, you guys fight to death. पहले भी I was paying tax. After this also I'll be paying tax to you. I was doing my work पहले भी, अभी भी I'll do my work. So during this time, there was no involvement of the citizenry in their own management, in their own governance structure. And how did they how did the empires try to convince the people into, say, getting ruled? ठीक है ना? So the authority of ruling was derived mainly through religion, that it is the divinity, or one king has a divine control, or it has been endowed by the god for them to rule upon you, or rule upon the common people. That ठीक है? So authority of rule was based on the not on the will, but it was derived through the divine. Role of religion was very high in politics and society. ठीक है? You had church and state. ठीक है? And static inequality during this time, uh, it was static inequality. It's a very different concept than normal inequality and your normal slavery also. in this, there just cannot be any change in status. मतलब it's a hereditary status. You can say akin, this is something akin to your, you know, very crude or detrimental form of caste system. Ki, you might be, just cannot change your caste. Similarly, during this time, there was static inequality. A person who was a serf had to remain a serf, and a lord would remain a lord. So, unlike the slavery system or any of the modern capitalistic states, this was a very, very uh, exploitative mechanism. You can say that. Okay. Acha. I'll cover both modern thought and postmodern thought in a single go. This effectively, the modern thought started with the downfall of medieval thinking, and it was around 1600s. You can say the time of Renaissance, Industrial Revolution, the birth of nation states, etc. Okay. You'll find with the collapse of Roman Empire, there were states like France or small states, Germany coming together, the German states, or Italy, or UK, Spain, Portugal, etc. Matlab, all these states, when the nations start to become, during that era was the start of modern thinking. And modern thought from that era till now, it has gone under refinement, and that refinement, it's called the postmodern thought. But there's not a complete break from modern thought and postmodern thought. So during the modern thought, sovereignty is the key concept. Since we're talking about nation states as the basic structure of the political, framework, and how are nation states deriving the power on the basis of sovereignty. And during this time, the individuals are most important aspect. जो हमने स्टार्टिंग में बात की थी कि the politics is an interplay of individual, state, and society. During the modern thought, individual becomes most important element in these three, and thus the equality is a key word, that is amongst man and man, man and woman, woman and woman. जब हम मतलब you'll see that ability to question all the institutional structures, the powers, etc., that may be, all this again ties back to the same, that the individual becomes very important. So everybody has a right. Everybody, the concept or the importance of life was recognized. That I also have a life. I also have a soul, etc. I can question the power structures which are ordering me to forfeit my land or to ordering me to work 20 hours a day. I don't want to. I can question why, how does it help me or how does it help the society? So, this was a very, very important break from the medieval thought, and this was heralded as a major improvement over the medieval thought. As a negative outflow of the modern thought, we see that colonialism rose. I'm not going to criticize industrial revolution and rise of capitalism per se, because from the medieval framework, this was a major improvement. Now, when again, now we'll come to postmodern thought. This can be, we are currently living in this age. Okay, so whatever was wrong in the modern thought was sort of, the political thinkers tried to correct in the postmodern thought. So you can understand from 1600s or say 1700s, any person who said कि modern thinking का कोई भी element अच्छा है, तो everybody was like हाँ अच्छा है, अच्छा है, अच्छा है. In 1950s 1960s, we started to realize कि modern thought के सारे elements अच्छे नहीं हैं. There are certain shortfalls there. It is not leading to harmonious life for everybody. So some people start to refine कि हाँ, modern thought के majority the principles अच्छे हैं, but these can be made better, these can be made more equitable. जैसे कि when we talk about individualism was a key factor in your modern era. ठीक है, but there are three key stakeholders: individual, state, and society. So if one stakeholder becomes crucially important or more important than the other, So it'll tilt the balance, and thus it'll disrupt or distort the entire framework. So in postmodern thought, excessive individualism was highlighted, and empathy or care is being promoted. Excessive individualism has led to environmental issues, has led to exploitation of the people itself. Like one powerful man, for its own self-interest, might try to make slave of somebody else. And by slave, I don't exactly mean you purchase a person and legally own them, but economic slavery, that they cannot go anywhere else, they cannot get a higher wage. There'll be extreme inequality. Okay, and during this age, there were all the disciplines, the interlinkages were emphasized upon. That how does political sphere impact the economic sphere? How does economic sphere impact international relations? How does international relations affect the social structures in one particular place? During this time, non-state actors, जब हम we talk about interrelationship, we would also like to highlight the role of non-state actors. That how does role of USA helps their multinational corporations exploit the people of, say, South America? Or how does non-state actors like a terrorist organization of a neighboring country might impact the social stability of states in northern parts of the country? Okay. So these all aspects started to get highlighted. During the postmodern thought, environmental issues and feminism became very, very prominent. We'll study about that as well in detail. Okay. So in the next lecture, we'll study our first major political thinker, that is Plato. If I'll probably post it today or tomorrow, whenever I get time. So if you can do read about the thinker beforehand, it'll help you understand the concepts much better. Okay. Thank you.